Hey, Miss Shirley, how are you? You had a good week? Hey, Sherry, how are you doing today? Y'all ready for tonight's book? I'm doing pretty well. I had me a nap on my porch bed today. Hey, Fancy Lou Who, how are you? It's been a pretty good week for me. Work slowly started to pick up. Oh, Miss Shirley, yes, I had a wonderful nap. I got my porch bed. It's a day bed that I put on the back porch. It's covered. And the only problem is the porch is not screened in, so I get skeeter bed if I'm out there too much. But like when I got off work today, I went out there and laid down, and it was so nice. That breeze was blowing, and I mean, I didn't go into a deep sleep or anything, but it was so peaceful, so relaxing after work. Vincy, you're gonna have to start listening to your body, darling. Remember what you said to Nina today. Listen to your body and don't overdo it. But yeah, oh gosh, it was so nice. Excuse me. I ain't been awake too long. Neighbor next door woke me up. One of our chickens nested on top of, and it's a long story, but anyways, under her carport, there was a cage where we were keeping the rooster in for just a little while he was injured, and there was some hay sitting up there, and one of the hens nested up there. Well, the chicks are starting to hatch, and she was freaking out because the mama was pushing them off the cage, and it's about a 3 foot drop, maybe 4 foot, it might be a little bit higher than that. And the she was freaking out because the mama was pushing the babies off, and I'm like, that's what they do. That's okay. They're not hurt. Plus, there's hay on the ground right there, so it's not like they were just landing on gravel or concrete or anything. So, but yeah, we got chicks around here everywhere. Just in the past month, that's the fourth nest, the hatch, and I think there's one more hen that's missing that I think she's got, because they're kind of free range. They're just yard birds. They're what we call here in the South uh, gamecocks, and they're they're just yard birds. So we just get rid of the. I think we lost Miss Shirley. She kind of comes and goes. Um, but I think we're probably looking at, well, there's five, seven, say another seven, because we had one nest come out yesterday, and I don't know, I haven't gotten a good count on those yet, and another seven ish. So 7 times 4, what, 20? What is 7 times 4? I don't even know what 7 times 4 is. 27, 20. 7 times 3 is 21, 28. Okay. Yes, I work at a computer all day. So we're looking at probably 30 birds right now, because 30 chicks, 30 nuggets. Nuggets. 5 were just weaned from their mama, and she's already prancing her prissy butt back around the rooster, who is not the daddy of all these because he was injured during that time. These two here, these 30 here, have two different daddies. So, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. All right, everybody, come on. Come on in here. Sorry, I'm talking, and when I talk, I need to get my gum. I apologize for chewing gum in front of you guys, but if you'll see, this is dry mouth gum. And so I usually try to chew about a half a piece when maybe sometimes more as I need it. So my mouth dries out. I'm on a medication that makes makes my mouth dry out, and then when I'm talking, it makes it worse. So, all righty, one more minute, we'll go ahead and get started. Now, Miss Sherry, do we know you? I don't know that I've remember Sherry being on here. Are you with the author, or are you the author? Sometimes the authors come on here and they put their real personality on here, and then they go by a different pen name. So, or have been on here before and I just don't remember you, because that is entirely possible. I don't remember people. I'm the world's worst. I was trying to remember if I have ever read this author because her name sounds so familiar. How many of you guys are on Book Talk? I know Miss Shirley, you said you were. I know Vincey's not. How many other people we got? It's just you three right now. There's 4 on here. Okay. Well, I couldn't remember. And Sherry's a common name in the book world, believe it or not. I'm trying to get some book talkers scheduled, and I think we got some for July. But do I know? Sherry, you've been on here a few times, haven't you? Oh, okay. Oh, that's been a real hot minute there. Let's see. I may have read some of hers, but I don't think I've read any on here. Okay. All righty, let's go ahead and get started. A little drag in as they need to. I'm trying to read this without my glasses if I push it back there far enough. All right. Chapter 1. This is called Midnight Until Midnight, and it's a midnight duet. So there's 2 books to this series. And this is the first one. So, first is from Iris' point of view. Chapter 1. Okay. Home so soon. Desi sneered at me from her perch on the wingback chair in the sitting room. Her eyes were plastered on her phone. Her sister Anna snickered behind her. her face set in matching snare from the other chair, phone glued to her hand. I've been planning to come home today for weeks, I said calmly, keeping my temper in check. Well, you look dreadful, Anna said. They cackled like witches, and I rolled my eyes as I turned away from them. Thank God this was the last summer I had to spend with them. The last summer I had to be in a house that held painful, soul crushing memories was filled with people who hated me. Just one more summer. I pushed the handle back into my rolling luggage, lifting it from the floor and lugging it towards the large suitcase in the staircase in the middle of the grand foyer. Foyer. It'll come out both ways. Depends on which HGTV show I'm watching. My gaze flitted around the cavernous room, searching for her. Thankfully, my stepmother was nowhere to be found. The home that I grew up in, the home I had been born in, felt like a shell of its former self. The decor and furnishings no longer reminded me of my family, of my mother and father. It no longer felt like home. The bags hanging from my shoulder dug into my skin, making me lean to the side as I lifted my suitcase up the stairs. I stopped at the top of the first flight, setting everything down with a grunt of relief. I glanced around the second floor, searching for my stepmother, hoping she wouldn't materialize and ruin my first day home. I looked to my left down the hall that led to the master suite and her wing of the house. The hallway was dark and empty. Breathing a sigh of relief, I grabbed my bags again, pulling the handle back out to roll my luggage and dragging the other bags behind me. Turning to my right, I headed towards the wing that housed my room. That housed my room, Desi and Anna's rooms, and a few guest rooms. The rest of the guest rooms were on the slightly smaller third floor. When I reached my room, I dropped the bags again, leaning back against the door for a moment to catch my breath. I wasn't surprised Desi and Anna didn't offer to help. Wouldn't dream of carrying someone's luggage for them. And my stepmother had let go of most of the staff years ago because she couldn't afford to keep them on. Not after she and the twins spent all the money my father left them within 18 months of his death. Pushing through the door, the tension of returning home from college for my last summer dissipated as I entered my own space, but that was short lived. No wonder my stepmother hadn't put in an appearance yet. Everything that had been in my room when I left was last fall was gone. My bed, dresser, the trunk that held the last remainders of my parents' lives, and every article of clothing I had left behind were gone. Mabel Tremaine Carter strikes again. Rage filled my chest, making me shake. Bags forgotten, I stormed back towards the stairs, rushing down them two at a time before stopping in the sitting room where Desi and Anna still sat, engrossed in their phones. Where is it? What did she do with it? I barked, so close to Desi's face that she recoiled. I have no idea what you're talking about, Desi snarled. She and Anna were unattractive women, but when they were spiteful, it transformed their features into something downright ugly. My bed, my dresser. Where are my things? Anna shrugged. We've been in here all day, Iris. We don't know what you're talking about. I didn't bother answering them, just turned on my heel and headed towards the kitchen to find Mabel. Anger tunneled my vision, my face hot and my ears on fire. I was huffing by the time I reached the kitchen door, stopping to take a deep breath and get a grip on my emotions. I pushed through the door, hitting it so hard that my palms stung from the force. Iris! The voice of Naomi McAllister, one of our only staff members, the family's cook slash maid, and the only real mother figure I'd had since my mother died, stopped me in my tracks. Naomi, I said with a sigh as she wrapped me in a tight hug. Tears sprang to my eyes as her warm arms around me quelled the anger that coursed through my veins. She's not here, honey. She's having her tea in the conservatory, Naomi said from the look in her eyes. I could see her internal struggle. She wanted to be on my side, but she needed this job. I'll go see her out there then. You know what she did, don't you? Naomi nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Why? I asked, unable to keep my voice from breaking. You'll have to ask her that one, dear. She patted my arm as she walked past me to the large island and grabbed a dish towel. She worried the dish towel between her hands as she began to speak again. I know you haven't had a good time of it growing up here, but I am glad you're home. I miss you when you're at school. This must be a British one because it's saying ye a lot. So it'd be like, I'm glad you're I'm glad I missed you when you're not here. I can't even do it because I can't do a British accent. I gave her a weak smile. I missed you too, Naomi. The tears in her eyes began to spill at the name I used for her when I was a child. I gave her a light squeeze before heading toward the conservatory. Mabel insisted on calling it a conservatory when it was actually just a large sunroom separated from the kitchen with folding glass doors that could be expanded to open all the way up or closed to divide the rooms. She had the doors installed a few years ago when she used most of my father's money to renovate the first floor of the house. That was when my childhood home stopped feeling like mine. I began to plan what I would say to Mabel. She knew I was coming home for the summer. The terms of the will started stating that I was to be allowed to live in the home until my 21st birthday. After that, I could choose if I wanted the house or if I wanted to leave. I had one more summer before I could get the money in the trust my father left me. After that, I planned to get as far away from here as I could. Hey, Julie. I rounded the large marble covered island, past the breakfast nook, and headed back towards the sunroom. The doors were closed tight, Mabel preferring to be left alone, especially from her own daughters. Taking a deep breath, I slid open the door. Her eyes snapped up from the book she was reading, locking with mine in a way that said she knew I was home and that I was looking for her. Hello, darling. The way she said it was more curse than endearment. Hello, Mabel. What's happened to my room? My voice was calm, but it didn't reflect the way I felt on the inside. My stomach churned, bubbling with hate and rage. Mabel gave me a backhanded wave, rolling her eyes, her expression one of boredom. Oh, that. I'm having the rooms painted in your wing. I didn't think you would want to stay in there while it was being done. I had to move your things to the attic. The bored look was replaced with a sinister smirk. The attic? I snapped, unable to keep my emotions in check for much longer. Yes, if you'll give me a moment, I'll show you. Her whole demeanor changed as she watched me, from satisfaction at my distress to irritation that she had to take time to get me settled in a new place. This situation wasn't anything unusual. I was used I was used to Mabel trying to upend my life. Right after my father died, the summer I turned 12, she tried to ship me off to boarding school, but then the lawyer informed her that my father's will stated I was to remain in the house until after I graduated college. The first summer I went away, I came home to find my dog missing. Buddy was a little Yorkie that my father bought me for my 11th birthday. I took care of him myself and but wasn't allowed to take him with me to school. I worried about him on a daily basis because my stepmothers and stepsisters were so cruel, but Naomi assured me she would care for him in my absence. But when I came home, I couldn't find him anywhere. That night, after the three of them denied having seen him, Anna slipped up and mentioned the abandoned stables at the end of the property. I rushed out there and found Buddy tied up and crying. After that, I had no choice but to find another home for him or risk my cruel family hurting him to get to me. The following summer, when I came home, Desi and Anna had taken over my room. There were 10 rooms in the house, and yet Mabel put them with me to torture me while she had their rooms redecorated. I ended up sleeping on the couch all summer. Last summer, she sold off all of my belongings except everything except my trunk because no one wanted a ratty old trunk. I just had to survive this summer with them, had to survive until my birthday, August 30th. After that, I would have access to my inheritance and be able to leave this horrid place and these horrid women behind. Follow me, Mabel ordered, snapping me out of my reverie. She didn't wait for me to catch up, but took off towards the kitchen and down a back hall that led out to the yard. I followed her, wondering how we would access the attic this way. She stopped just before the outside door, turning left down a rarely used hallway, which I thought led to a root cellar. At the end of the hall was a slim door with a crystal handle. Though I was born in this house and had lived here all my life, I had never been in this room. My father used to tell me not to explore the locked areas because they may be dangerous, remnants of the old part of the house built centuries ago. With rotten floorboards and rusty nails, he was always so worried I would get injured. Mabel used an old key from her sweater pocket, slipping it into the ancient lock before wrenching the door open by the crystal knob. She stepped back, motioning for me to go through the door. I hesitated, unsure what was up there or what she would do once I stepped through it. She wasn't above imprisonment. Nerves fluttered in my stomach as she tapped on her foot and cleared her throat. Hastily, I moved through the door. I was surprised to see a steep wooden staircase covered with dust leading to another level. I don't have all day, Iris, Mabel snapped. Taking a deep breath, I started up the stairs. Trepidation built in the pit of my stomach as I ascended, making my steps falter. I went down hard on my knee because there was no railing. Dust covered my legs. Jesus Christ! Will you stand up? Mabel grabbed my bicep, her nails digging into my skin. I'm fine. I shook off her hold, standing up right then because of my leg off, and then brushed off my legs. I kept climbing, well aware of Mabel's presence behind me. At the top, I paused, looking around the wide open space in confusion. It wasn't the attic. This room appeared to have been renovated several decades ago. I turned to Mabel. Was this the servants' quarters? She pursed her lips, and I could tell she was debating what to tell me as the question hung in the stale, dusty air between us. It used to be a long time ago. Your grandparents had it renovated back in the 60s. At least that's what your father told me. It's dusty and dim, and I don't have any use for it. You'll have your own bathroom up here and your privacy. I thought you would want that after all that complaining you've done about Desi and Anna being in your space. She threw my words from previous years in my face. I walked to the center of the room. My furniture had been set up for me, the bed against the far wall between two doors, the dresser to the right between two blacked out dormer windows, my trunk set at the foot of the bed. The couch and chair I'd saved from the yard sale Mabel had after my father's death faced the TV mounted on the opposite wall. Why go to all the trouble of mounting my TV if my old room was only being painted? Because she's fucking lying. The bathroom is through there. Mabel pointed at the door to the left of my bed. I started toward it, not answering her, my mind racing and my stomach turning. It wasn't so much that I had to spend the rest of my summer in an attic room that used to be servants' quarters, but that my stepmother felt the need to store me here to torture me. A shiver ran down my spine as I remembered the key she used to unlock the door from the outside. I would have asked for the key, but there was no guarantee she would give it to me. Pulling the door to the bathroom open, I blew out a relieved breath between my lips. There was a shower, a clawfoot tub, and a pedestal sink, all in decent condition, though they could use a good bleaching. Mabel was right. The black and white checkered tile on the floor and the white tile on the walls were definitely remnants from the 60s. I'll have Naomi bring your bags up, Mabel said curtly, turning on her heel to head back down the stairs, as if she couldn't stand another minute up here. No, no, I'll get them. Naomi can't carry them by herself. Suit yourself, she said, giving me one last backward look and disappearing down the stairs. I wanted to fall on the bed and cry myself to sleep, my throat already constricting with tears. But I had to get my bags and clean the dust coating every inch of this room, or I would lose my mind. I couldn't sleep in a room this filthy. Without wasting any more time, I trudged back down the stairs, through the kitchen, and into the foyer. Desi and Anna were still in the front room, engrossed in their phones, and I ignored them as I hurried up the stairs to where I'd left my bags. I lugged the bags back to my servants' quarters. Why gloss over it? And dropped them on the floor in the hall. My next order of business was cleaning. This time I did employ Naomi's help. After changing into something I didn't mind getting dirty, I went back to the kitchen to find her. She was where I'd left her, at the stove, preparing a meal for three most ungrateful women I knew. Naomi, when you're finished, will you give me a hand with my new room? She turned, giving me a sympathetic look. I can do that for you, Iris. It's awfully dusty up there. No, I'll do most of it. I just need to know where the supplies are and help getting it all upstairs. You're busy making dinner. Naomi wiped her hands on her apron, flipped the burner off, and walked back the way I came. We made our way down the narrow hallway towards the attic room in silence. Naomi went through the door that led out to the side yard. Between this door and the one that led outside was a laundry room that also functioned as a mud room. It was paved with brick, which I knew was original to the house. Horizontal wood panels painted hunter green came halfway up the walls. The washer and dryer were tucked into the left corner, a utility closet and sink flanking them. To the left were hooks and cubbies with a bench, just waiting for a family with small children to use them. The only items that adorned the space now were a pair of rubber boots Naomi used when she did yard work and a rain jacket. Naomi crossed the small room to the utility closet, wrenched it open, and gestured at the contents. The mop, the vacuum, and all cleaning items are in here. I nodded. I wasn't like my stepsisters. I had actually cleaned the house before. Let's grab as much as we can now so we don't have to make two trips, Naomi said. She pulled sprays and sponges out, loading them into a bucket. I grabbed the mop and vacuum, unwilling to let an older woman carry the heavy things up the stairs. When we reached the landing, both of us panting and sweating, I set my load down and surveyed the room again. The pit had returned to my stomach as I thought about tackling the cleaning. It wasn't that I was averse to cleaning, but the entire situation made me feel defeated. I shouldn't have had to clean this room because I shouldn't have been moved here in the first place. A sudden longing for my dad gripped my chest, taking my breath away. This happened from time to time when I thought of what might have been if he hadn't died in that car accident 10 years ago. Would he have been divorced? Would he have divorced Mabel? Would he have been living happily without them in our home? I closed my eyes against the feeling, jamming a fist between my breasts to ease the ache. A gentle hand patted my back. I know, child. I know. Naomi's voice soothed away enough of the hurt that I could open my eyes again. Let's do this, I said with a sigh. Naomi nodded. It was my last summer in the house with these women. I had to do what I could to survive. I'm thinking of Naomi as being like one of my grandmothers or my great grandmothers. That's where that southern comes in from. 2 hours and a lot of elbow grease and bleach later, my new room was clean. Ugh, now I need a shower, I said, running to the back of my arm over my forehead. So do I. Naomi's Scottish accent. See, I knew she wasn't Southern, but Scottish ain't a whole lot far from it sometimes. So do I. Naomi's Scottish accent was more pronounced when she was away from Mabel for a while. I began to gather the cleaning supplies while I spoke. Thank you so much for helping. I could have done it on my own. Nonsense. I wouldn't have let you do this on your own. Nonsense. I wouldn't have let you do this on your own. That vile woman has gone too far this time. She whispered the last sentence as if Mabel could hear her all the way up here. We exchanged a hug, and my eyes misted over for what felt like the 20th time today. Thank you anyway. I really do appreciate it. You've made this house bearable the last 10 years. Someone had to take care of you, dear. Whenever your father left on a business trip, he'd tell me to care for his little flower, and that's what I've done because he never came back to tell me otherwise. The tears I had been holding back all day began to fall. I sniffed, trying to suck them back up to no avail. Instead, I let the tears fall for a bit longer, silently sobbing as Naomi held me tightly. After I was done, she patted my back gently again before releasing me. She picked up her bucket of supplies and headed down the staircase. I followed with the vacuum and mop. After everything was back in place, I headed upstairs to jump in the shower. I stood in the middle of the room looking around. Well, at least it was clean. With a sigh, I packed my clothes into the dresser, stashed the suitcase in the closet to the right of the bed, and laid something out to wear. I collected my toiletries and set them in the bathroom, stripped off my dusty and dirty stained clothes, leaving them in a pile on the floor, and turned the water on. Without waiting for it to get hot, I stepped in, wincing at the icy water needled my back. I put my head back under the spray once the water had warmed enough to stand, then gathered my blonde curls in my hands to saturate them. My mind was racing and sluggish all at the same time. Being here in this house gave me anxiety, but I was also exhausted from the flight to Georgia this morning. Added to that, I spent the better part of the last 2 hours cleaning and I was dead on my feet. After drying off, I padded back into the room, the bare hardwood floor under my feet. I would have to get a few area rugs. What little energy I had left seeped from my body as I pulled on a soft, oversized t shirt and pajama shorts and climbed into bed. After that, after that point, at that point, I hadn't had lunch or dinner, and my stomach protested even as my eyelids grew heavy. But it was too late. As my eyes slipped closed, I realized I hadn't pressed Mabel for the door key. I sat bolt upright, my heart racing, gripping my chest. I looked around. Where am I? It took a moment for my eyes to adjust in the nearly pitch black room. My gaze roamed, searching for something familiar to latch onto. The dresser, the chest, the bed. Mine. I was in the attic. I flopped back against the pillow, tossing my arm over my eyes. Tears stung, but I wouldn't let them out. The blacked out dormer windows made this room almost completely dark at night. I had no memory of turning the light off next to my bed, but I must have done it before I dozed off. What time is it? I rolled over, feeling for my phone on the nightstand. My fingers touched the screen, lighting it up. 4:33. Fuck. Groaning, I rolled back over, squeezing my eyes shut to will myself back to sleep. But sleeping didn't come. After tossing and turning for the next 30 minutes, I decided to get up and go for a run. The sky was beginning to lighten through the chipped paint on the windows, so I knew it was no longer dark outside. I rolled out of bed and shuffled over to my dresser, locating running shorts and a tank. I switched them out of my pajamas and slipped on my running shoes. After tying my wild, sleep rumpled curls into a messy bun, I shoved my earpods into my ears. Running was my thing, my way to cope with stress and anxiety. Going for a run would help clear my head a little bit, and it would exhaust my body. Nice of you to show up, Miss Nina. I know. You were here. You just weren't talking. You were busy. I slipped my phone into the case that, and oh, all right. Going for a run would help clear my head a little bit, and it would exhaust my body in the right way so I could get more than a few hours of sleep that night. I slipped my phone into the case that strapped onto my arm and crossed the room. At the top of the stairs, I had a sudden flash of panic at the idea that maybe Mabel locked me in. No, she wouldn't do that, right? Mabel hated me, but she wasn't a sociopath. That's what I had to believe to get through this last summer. Taking a deep breath, I jogged down the stairs and reached the doorway. The knot in my stomach loosened the second the door gave way. The house was eerily silent as I walked through the kitchen, which meant I was likely the only person awake. Naomi wasn't even in her usual spot in front of the stove. Ignoring my growling stomach, I headed back down the hallway to the side door. On the patio, I stretched, pulling one leg behind me, then the other. Memories from my childhood slapped me in my face as I looked out over the property. The house sat on 12 acres, an old farm just outside of Atlanta. Well, good. I was doing the right accents anyway. Psh, it's my home grounds. When I was little, we had a horse, two goats, and a cow, and a few chickens. After my mom died, Dad got rid of the animals because he was too grieved to care for anything but me. My mother loved the farm, the animals, her garden. Her death drained the life out of the farm itself. At least that was how it seemed when I was a child. My father's death years later knocked the wind out of me because it left me alone, orphaned. What are you doing? Anna's shrill voice startled me from out of my memories. I whipped around. I'm going for a run. I almost didn't answer because I didn't owe her anything. This early? Your clumping around woke me up. She stomped her foot like a child. I ignored that. There was no way she'd have heard me all the way upstairs in the other wing of the house. Desi and Anna slept like the dead. Mother isn't going to like this. I shrugged. I'm not a prisoner here, Anastasia. Anna took a step back as if I'd slapped her. Obviously. What a strange thing to say. Her voice turned into a strange shriek. Why won't your mother like it if I go for a run then? She opened her mouth, then closed it quickly. Well, you'll wake the whole house. I rolled my eyes. Goodbye, Anna. Without a glance back at her, I turned the music on in my earpods and jogged off. 3 miles later, I came to a stop, leaning over to catch my breath. I hadn't intended to run so far, but after the encounter with Anna, I was in no hurry to go back home. Of course, now I had 3 miles to run back. With a groan, I dragged my tired limbs to the curb and sat down. The house was down a rural county road, a few miles outside the small town of Finchburg, 30 minutes south of Atlanta. Finchburg might just as well have been a state away from how. All right, hold on. I'm not real. The house was down a rural county road, a few miles outside of the small town of Finchburg, 30 minutes south of Atlanta. Finchburg might just as well have been a state away from how country it was. I had managed to run into the town limits, not thinking how little I wanted to see other people. I hoped that because of the early hour, I wouldn't encounter anyone as I rested on the sidewalk. A handful of cars drove by, their drivers paying no attention to the sweaty woman sitting on the curb. I stood stretching out my quads and hips, then turned away from town and began to run again, this time at a slower pace. A mile in, just outside of town, as the roads became more rural with no curbs or sidewalk, I heard a car approaching behind me. Even though I ran on the opposite side of the road facing traffic, I hopped off the road just in case. My awkward movements caused my ankle to twist where the side of the blacktop sloped down to the grass, and I went down like a ton of bricks, collapsing onto the grass. Shit. I sat up and gingerly pulled my leg closer to examine my throbbing ankle. It was already beginning to swell. Are you okay? A male voice came from across the road. I looked up at the man in an all black two-door Audi. Its tinted windows rolled down. I'm okay, I said wearily. Are you sure? Instead of waiting for me to answer, he closed the window, opened the door, and stepped out. I immediately felt underdressed and frumpy as I watched him cross the street towards me. Like his car, he was dressed in all black. Black fitted jeans, a black dress shirt with its long sleeves rolled up, black dress shoes, and dark black Ray-Bans. Even his hair was black. I'm fine, really. I tried to stand, wincing in pain and collapsing back to the grass. Let me help you. He reached down and grabbed my arm before I could refuse, pulling me to stand. Thanks, I murmured, gingerly moving away from him. Who was he? He definitely wasn't from town. He looked too polished, too much like he belonged in New York City, where I had come from yesterday, not rural Georgia. Worriness crept back in, and I took another hobbling step away from him. I will be so glad when all this pollen slows down and my voice is not creaking anymore. I'm okay now, I said, hoping he'd get the hint and leave me alone. Do you live in town? I don't tell strangers where I live. He chuckled. Well, then, I'd better introduce myself. He pulled off his sunglasses, his eyes meeting mine. I gasped out loud. I couldn't help it. I was staring into the most beautiful, deep brown eyes framed with long, wispy black eyelashes. He was gorgeous. Ignoring my gasp, he stuck his hand out and said, I'm Amir Farid. I'm in town on business. I wiped my sweaty hands on my shorts before I took his hand. A shock of awareness passed between us as his fingers closed around mine. I fought back another gasp as I yanked my hand away. I'm Iris, I managed to croak. Amir laughed again. Can I give you a ride home, Iris, since you're injured? I also don't get into cars with strangers. That's a good policy to have. Thanks for helping me up. I'm okay now. I turned away from him, which probably wasn't the best idea, but he didn't follow me. Instead, he watched me limp away. I haven't kidnapped a woman in a really long time, he said to my retreating back. I spun around so quickly that I tweaked the ankle again. My legs gave out from under me, and I crumpled to the grass. Shit! Amir rushed over, trying to help me stand again. I'm sorry, I was only joking. I gave a weak laugh. Probably not the best joke to make to a woman alone with a stranger. Are you sure I can't give you a ride? How far are you from home? It's probably not a good idea to walk far on that ankle. I bit my lip. He was partially right. I couldn't walk 3 miles on a sprained ankle, but could I trust this guy enough to get into a car with him? It wasn't like I had much of a choice. Who was I going to call to pick me up? Mabel, Anna, or Desi? I nearly laughed out loud at that. All right. His eyebrows shot up to the hairline. Yeah? I'll bring the car around so you don't have to walk back. Amir jogged back across the street, slipped into his sleek black car, and whipped a U-turn in the middle of the road. He stopped next to where I stood, leaning with all my weight on my left foot. He put the car in park, hopped out, and ran around to the passenger side to open the door for me. Thanks, I mumbled as I slid into the black leather bucket seat. I was even underdressed for the car. The engine roared as he pulled away from the shoulder, shooting down the country road like a rocket. Where to? He asked after a minute of silence. I rattled off the address to the house. His eyes widened, but he just nodded. Since he didn't plug it into the car or his phone's GPS, I assumed he knew exactly where he was going. Are you from Georgia? I asked him curiously. He had said he was in town on business, but not that he was necessarily from out of state. No, New York, Brooklyn specifically. He paused, shaking his head. How about you? Born and raised? Yeah, unfortunately. I mean, it's not that Georgia is awful or anything, but I wanted to say so much more, but something made me stop. Did his this kind of stranger really need all the sordid details of my messed up family? But nah, you don't want to hear about my family drama. Try me, he said, his voice sincere. I snuck a look at his face. His deep brown eyes were focused on me, the car standing still at a stop sign. Okay, but don't say I didn't warn you. I took a deep breath, preparing to tell him the thing I was always held back when I met new people for fear of their pity. I'm an orphan. I lost my mom when I was small. She died of breast cancer before I started second grade. My dad, he was killed in a car accident while on a business trip when I was 11. I stopped, waiting for the inevitable. I'm sorry. Wow. I lost my mom when I was young too. I spun in the seat to face him. Really? He nodded. Yeah, I was 16 when she died, pancreatic cancer. Our eyes locked. We didn't say a word, but we didn't have to. A silent understanding passed between us. The Dead Parents Club. It wasn't the best club to be a part of, but when you met someone who was a member, it was somewhat comforting. They just knew, without having to say anything, what you were feeling. It was refreshing not to have to explain. It was a relief not to have to make someone else feel better about your loss. We didn't speak after that, having revealed too much of ourselves to each other in such a short span of time after meeting. Amir drove in silence while I stared out the window. My ankle throbbed, and I hoped I wouldn't need to have it x-rayed. Minutes later, he turned into the driveway, stopping at the gate that cut access off to the circular drive near the house. You can let me out here. Are you sure? You'll have to walk all the way up. Yeah, I'll be fine. I wanted to get away from him for some reason. Not because I was scared of being with a stranger, but because it felt like we were no longer strangers. In the span of 10 minutes it took to drive me home, Amir had somehow become something to me. It didn't make any sense. Okay, then. I'm sorry I made you hurt your ankle. He gave me a sheepish look, rubbing the back of his neck with one hand. It was nice meeting you, though. You too. Good luck with your business, I said, pushing the door open and stepping out carefully. Goodbye, Iris. A shiver ran down my spine as I met his eyes when he said my name. Why did he say it that way? Goodbye, Amir. I slammed the car door and turned away from it. Hobbling up to the gate, I punched the code in, holding my breath with the hope that Mabel hadn't changed it since yesterday. Seconds later, the gates creaked open and I released the breath. I could tell that Amir was still there, watching me walk away, but I didn't turn around. I limped up the driveway slowly and deliberately, pretending I wasn't unnerved by the man dressed in black with the haunting eyes. Chapter 3. I don't know if I'll finish this chapter, but we'll go ahead and read some more. Oh, my nose is itching. Did you do what? Oh, this is from Amir's point of view, y'all. Did you do what needs to be done? My father's angry voice barked into my ear. I put everything in motion, yes. I answered, trying to keep my voice steady and not give anything away. Good, Amir. There's a lot of money riding on this job. If you botch it up, he spat at me in Farsi. Yeah, I don't speak Middle Eastern either. His voice echoed around the car through my speakers, and I cringed. When my father was angry, everyone knew it. I won't, but there are some complications, Father. I tried to plead with him to give me more time, but I wasn't likely to sway him. What could possibly complicate this? We have the orders, the description of the girl, and how we should carry it out. I thought you said everything was in place. His voice was calm now, which was more frightening than when he was yelling. There was an accident. It complicates things. I repeated, I can't explain it all right now. When I get back to the hotel, I'll call you from the secure line. I will remind you that's something in Farsi, like an endearment or sign or something. That the business dealings we have with this family are long. We need to ensure they are happy with the results, or we won't see that money, and we need that money. Our business. I know, Baba. I know. I ran a hand through my perfectly gelled hair, loosening strands to fall into my eyes. I may have looked put together, but I didn't feel it. Nothing about this situation felt put together or organized. We weren't supposed to be doing this. Father had told me he was going legit. I thought he meant it. I thought this was over. Going to law school had complicated things for me with my family. With a sigh, I laid my head back against the seat. I'll call you to update you on the situation. I'll get it done, I said, my voice resolute. I didn't have another choice, no matter how Iris made me feel in those short 15 minutes we spent together. Oh, that was the end of that chapter. So we'll go to chapter 4. Iris. Where have you been? Mabel shouted as I staggered through the front of the house and back towards the kitchen. Her voice echoed from the front parlor. Grimacing at the weight on my ankle, I pivoted around to look back towards the parlor where I knew she sat perched on the edge of the fancy couch as if it had offended her. I twisted my ankle jogging, I said as she came into view, looking exactly as I expected her to in a house robe, fancy slippers that had to cost more than my whole closet full of clothing, and her lips pursed. Well, suits you right after leaving the house so early and waking up Anna. An evil smirk stretched over her face. She was enjoying my pain. I didn't wake her. There was no way. You know that. It doesn't matter. I waved a hand at her and turned to go ice my ankle. Where are you going? I wasn't done. I ground my teeth together. I'm sorry. What else do you need? I said with a mock sweetness through my clenched jaw. I have some business acquaintances coming for dinner. I hadn't expected to invite you. She paused, a strange look on her face. But since you're here, why not? Anyway, I expect you to be dressed appropriately and not to embarrass me. What if I have plans tonight? I didn't, but I could have. Well, she tapped her nails on the wooden arm of the chair, waiting for me to answer. I said, Fine, I'll join your dinner. Mabel dismissed me with a wave. I went back to my slow shuffle towards the kitchen in search of an ice bag. There was no use arguing with Mabel when she was in one of her moods. If I had something to do, I would have tried to argue my way out of her wretched dinner. But since I didn't have an excuse, I didn't have the energy for it. It was probably another attempt at marrying off one of her wretched daughters to the highest bidder. Every so often, she held a dinner party for rich, eligible bachelors from Atlanta to try to fix with Anna or Desi up. Unsurprisingly, none of the so-called eligible men she brought here wanted anything to do with her daughters. In the kitchen, out of earshot of my stepmother, my shoulders relaxed. I blew out a breath as I rummaged through the freezer. There were no ice packs, so I gathered several ice cubes and slipped them into a zip top bag before wrapping a dish towel around it. I plopped down onto a stool at the island, lifted my injured foot to rest on the stool next to mine. It was so cold. I winced at first, gritting my teeth until it became tolerable, hoping the ice did the trick so I wouldn't have so that I could be without pain for this dinner. Well, physical pain anyway. Thank you, Miss Sherry, for joining us. Sorry you couldn't stick around for when I get finished and find the hook. Go get the book. What happened, dear? Naomi's voice made me raise my head from where it was resting on my hands. I twisted my ankle while I was running. I hope it's just a little sprain and not something worse. Oh my, do you want me to get you some acetaminophen, some Tylenol? That would be great. Thank you. I went back to brooding, my mind wandering to Amir after a while, without my permission. He definitely looked like he belonged in New York City or a GQ catalog. My face heated as I remembered the way he looked at me as I got out of the car. I hadn't seen a man that beautiful in, well, ever. Why had he been driving down the country road away from town? What kind of business could he possibly have in this small, closed-minded town? Here you go, sweets, Naomi said as she flitted back into the room, the Tylenol in her hand, since I have a hard time with the generic word for it. I took the pills as she was filled. I took the pills as she filled a glass with water for me. I tossed the pills into my throat and swallowed with a gulp of water. Did she rope you into her dinner party? Naomi whispered when I set my glass down. I nodded. Unfortunately, I don't even know if I have anything to wear to this nonsense. Naomi snorted. I'm sure anything you wear will look better than what Anastasia and Desiree will be wearing. You're probably right. As spoiled as my stepsisters were, they had no fashion sense. That meant they had closets full of awful clothes. They thought that a designer name meant it was fashionable. I tried to tell them that wasn't how it worked, but of course, they wouldn't take my advice from a penniless orphan. Have you eaten breakfast? Naomi asked, snapping me from my thoughts. No, I left so early I didn't have time. I'm starving now, though. How about I heat you up some oatmeal? I can make my own breakfast, Naomi. You don't have to wait on me like you do the others. I know that, dear. I like waiting on you. She winked and I chuckled. If it weren't for Naomi, my life in this place would be so much worse. I watched her putter around the kitchen as she prepared the oatmeal. Within 5 minutes, I had a steaming bowl of oats with maple syrup, raisins, and milk sitting in front of me. My stomach rumbled. Thank you so much, Naomi. She nodded, her eyes tearing up. I wasn't sure what made her so sad, but I was hoping it wasn't the same thing that made me tear up almost daily in this house. Or maybe I was hoping it was because at least then I wasn't alone in the feelings of missing my parents. After waiting for it to cool a moment, I dug into my oatmeal, wolfing it down in a record time. By the time I was done, Naomi had prepared a huge breakfast with coffee. I snagged a cup for my stepmother and stepsisters. They came strolling into the kitchen, Mabel fully dressed in coral linen slacks with a white button up top, her hair coiffed and her face expertly done up, while the terrible two were still in their pajamas, hair rumpled and feet bare. Mabel looked them over with disdain, but didn't say anything. She never did. In her eyes, those two could do no wrong, even when they did. Instead, she turned her cold gray eyes, the color of storm clouds on the horizon, to me. What's all this? She waved her hand over me in general, but I knew she was referring to me icing my ankle. I wanted to roll my eyes at her because she knew exactly what it was. The show was for the benefit of the twins. She wanted them to comment on the state of my ankle. Desi, taking the bait, turned to me, her eyes going wide. What on earth did you do to yourself now, clumsy? Oh, my word, Mother. Iris is always looking for sympathy, Anna stated in after her sister. I bit my tongue, my gaze flitting to where Naomi stood near the stove, her eyes filled with remorse for something that wasn't her fault. I think she's faking it. Doesn't she look like she's faking it, Mother? Daisy added when I responded. As long as this injury doesn't ruin the dinner party tonight, I couldn't care less if she's faking it or not, Mabel said, her eyes flashing with ire. I took a deep breath, closing my eyes for a beat. It's feeling better, actually. I stood up, gathering my mug and bowl, and walking as normally as possible to the sink. I took my time rinsing everything before placing the dishes in the dishwasher. They were watching me. I could feel it. I was sure the twins were mocking me, and Mabel was likely seething at me cleaning up after myself, all while making excuses in her head for her useless daughters. As I turned around, I heard a slight snicker from one of the twins, but I ignored it. Thanks, Naomi, I said as I walked towards my new attic room. The high road felt good, even when the only people there to witness it were the awful ones who forced you to take it in the first place. And that's a good stopping point. So you guys need to go get it and find out what Amir is up to. What's going on? Is he gonna be the one at the dinner party, or is something else going on? So, Miss Shirley, you know. All right. So the book is free on KU. Did you give all the info, Nina? I didn't even look. Let's see. I can do it from here. Da, 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 da. Well, I'm looking for it. Okay, it's free on KU or $4.99 to buy. Unless you want a paperback, then you got to pay another $10. So, all right, tomorrow night's is I forget because I'm bad at this stuff. Think you'll be at the dinner party? That'd be right. Tomorrow night is a paranormal called The Fae King's Solstice by it's book 2 by Sonny Mawson. So fays are some of my favorite to read because they sometimes I can do my witchy voice with fays. So Vincy, get ready. All right, everybody. Let me go rest my voice for a while and go see if the Braves are still beating the Red Sox or not. They beat them last night. They were winning when I came in here, but who knows? All right, everybody. Have a good night, and I'll talk to you guys later. Happy reading.